I wanted to clarify what I'd like you to hand in for the "You Are the Researcher" part of the lab assignment. Just to remind you, this refers to what starts at the bottom of page 88 of the textbook. As you know, I've modified the requirements for this assignment slightly. The modifications are in the second bullet of the handout, the second bullet under part 2 of the handout. Instead of 10 variables, I'm asking you to come up with 16 variables that describe the typical American. 6 of these need to be nominal, 6 ordinal, and 4 interval ratio, or in SPSS language, scale variables. You can remember, of course, that an ordinal variable is any variable where we can have some notion of greater than or less than. So oftentimes these attitudinal items that ask whether someone strongly agrees or strongly disagrees with some statement are counted as ordinal variables. Why? Because I can agree or disagree more than you. If you have a statement, let's say the death penalty is a great idea. Well, I can agree with that more than you agree with it. You might disagree with it. Okay, so that would be an example of an ordinal variable. Nominal, you should know, that's just a category. My race, my religion, what region of the country I live in, etc. And ratio or interval variables, in SPSS parlance, they call them scale variables, are any variable that we can do math with. So anything that's a real number, such as the number of hours worked, those sorts of things. The data set that you have to work with only includes a small number of ratio or scale variables. I've created one for you, and if you take a look at the handout, again, part 2, bullet number 2, what that variable is laid out for you pretty clearly there. I wanted to take a minute to explain something that I thought might be a bit confusing, having to do with what SPSS reports when it returns a modal value for you. In this syntax window, I've basically duplicated the same command that you would enter using the menu system, frequencies command, and I have 2 variables here: the number of hours worked and the respondent's highest degree. Number of hours worked is HRS1. Respondent's highest reported educational degree is simply the word degree. I've added these statistics options so that SPSS will report a mean, a median, and a mode for me. And let me place my cursor somewhere in that command, press the Run Selection button, and there we go. So let's take a look at what SPSS is reporting. In the number of hours worked last week, we see a mean of 39.75 hours and a median of 40 hours. Number of hours worked is clearly a ratio, or in SPSS parlance, a scale variable. So this mean and median that SPSS is reporting makes sense. This modal value doesn't really make any sense. There's nothing we can do with that. It's not wrong. It just doesn't really mean anything. It's not helpful to us. So we're going to ignore it. Let's go over here and now look at respondent's highest degree. Mean and median don't make any sense for a categorical variable. But mode does. Mode is the most frequently reported category among the respondents. So what does that 1 mean? Well, let's take a look. Let me first close this window here by double-clicking. All right. And now we're getting the frequency table for this respondent's highest degree variable. Let's take a look at valid percent. We have less than high school diploma, 15.4%, high school diploma, 47.5%. 47.5% looks like it is the most frequent category which is mentioned by our respondents. So that would be the modal value. So what then is the relationship between this 1 over here as a mode and what we can clearly see by looking at the frequency table, what the modal value is? Well, I'll show you. Let's go up to Utilities, click on Variables, and let's find that respondent's highest education variable. There it is, highest degree variable. Okay. Well, you can see here that respondent's highest degree, let's see, we have what SPSS is calling values here and labels over here. Now, these values are not really values. What they really are codes. What SPSS is reporting is that the most frequent code is code number 1. What category does code number 1 refer to? High school. So we're getting the same result here in the modal statistic area as we do by simply examining the frequency table. When you see this 1, you may be scratching your head and wondering what that means. There's no degree, which is degree 1. Again, for these nominal or categorical variables, the values that SPSS returns are really just codes, and you have to go to a code book or to this utility to understand what that code refers to. Okay, in terms of what I'd like you to hand in, you can follow the instructions in the text and hand in exactly what's called for on page 89 and 90, subject to the modification that you'll be handing in those tables on 16 variables, not just 10. The most important thing really is the write-up that you offer, the paragraph description of the typical American. Another, and I think maybe a better approach, and maybe a simpler approach, would be to create a Word document that includes that paragraph, and then make sure in that document you've also placed the 16 tables that substantiate the statement that you're making in the paragraph write-up. So for example, you might have a paragraph that says something like, the typical American works 39.73 hours per week. See Table 1, and Table 1 would have the number of hours that a typical American works. He or she has a high school education, and then you would reference the table with the education data in it, etc. As we move forward in the semester, we're going to be using SPSS more as an analytical tool, and we're going to spend less time filling out forms and answering questions precisely the way in which they're couched in the textbook. So if you want to take that kind of approach with this lab report, that's fine. In fact, it's preferred. But again, no one's going to get in any trouble for following the instructions exactly the way they're laid out in the textbook. If that's easier for you, if that makes more sense to you, if you've already done it that way, that's fine. No worries. If you have any questions or comments about this, you can email me or Lourdes directly, or post a question in the Q&A section of Blackboard. And if you have that question, there's a good chance that other students have it as well, and we'll try to answer it for you over there. Good luck.